Before I begin this episode, I just want to make a quick apology for the quality of the sound on my audio in some areas. There was a little bit of feedback, and as we know, technology can be on our side or sometimes against us, and unfortunately it wasn't playing the game with me here. And I did my best to clean it up, so I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you. Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick. Welcome to Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on Earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal, but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations will speak to your spirituality, sensuality and soul. Listen to their stories and hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. My guest this week is Serap Enver, founder of Innate Healing. She is a Reiki Master Teacher, quantum touch energy practitioner who also incorporates shamanic healing techniques. During our conversation, we discuss how revealing the secrets of the world is bringing up the hidden aspects in us all, the power of vulnerability, what it means to step into your power, and also our visions of what the new world could be. So as always, I begin by asking my guests, Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel you're most her?
That's a really good question. And it reminds me actually of a conversation that I had this morning with a friend of mine who asked me, she said, how do I open up my third eye? And it's a really common question that goes around, this idea that we connect through our third eye to something more, or it gives us some kind of psychic abilities or connection that we don't have. And as I was asking her, I kind of said, well, why is that? And she explained that she thought it meant a certain thing and looked a certain way. And I went on to explain to her that I didn't think that connection looked any certain way. It was more a way of feeling, a way of being present with something beyond the physical. And for me, that's very much a tangible feeling of peace, neutrality, joy, not all the time, but joy, which I think is definitely something that I feel when I'm connected to that part of myself that's beyond all of these physical limitations and physical expressions and senses. So for me, I feel most connected to her when I just stop and am present with everything in the physical. So it's not that I'm disconnecting from the physical. It's a presence with my body, my moods, my feelings, whatever they happen to be, my breath particularly. And in that space, something else comes in, something that's not really describable, actually. It's something for me that you feel, but not, again, in the traditional ways that we feel things. Does that sort of answer the question?
There's no right or wrong. That's the thing about this question, or any question, to be honest, is that I just want it to be, what comes to you when you hear that? And by beginning, it's interesting when I was formulating this podcast and just kind of getting like a structure together, even though the structure kind of goes out the window, but I just wanted to have a leading question. And by opening it up, it just allows you to find what's right for you. I can't say what that is. And I like that everyone interprets the question differently, even though the acronym is her. So it feels very feminine. I do ask the question of men as well when I have men on, and once they get over the I'm not her thing, then they then they find a space and a resonance with it as well, and it just gets us communicating on a level that I think is something that we all are more finding is more true, especially with what we're all experiencing in the world right now, finding what truth is. And this is something I really want to kind of dig in with you a little bit more as well. But before we go there, I just want you to just talk a little bit more about who you are and what got you to where you're at this moment, you know, what experiences to the level you want to share.
So I suppose I'll go back to the beginning of the kind of what we'll call the spiritual journey, which again is kind of a term that gets bandied around quite a lot, and it means different things to different people. But for me, my life was in quite a lot of chaos. It was about 15 years ago. I'd come out of a really yucky marriage. Everything was upside down, had absolutely no idea where I was going, what I was doing, even who I was. There was a lot of physical disharmony in my body as well. So I was kind of catapulted into this space of, how did I get here? How did this happen? You know, how did I create this? I wasn't really aware that I was a creator, but on some level, I knew that my life so far and my own journey was my responsibility in some way. So I eventually found myself seeing a shamanic healer for some healing on my back, because I'd herniated a disc, which again was a very physical thing. I'd done it in a very physical way, but it sent me down the path of, but hang on a sec, this isn't actually a physical problem. It's now a physical problem, but it wasn't. It comes from something much older and much deeper. And it was the first time I was in this session and suddenly all this stuff was happening, and I was feeling all this stuff that wasn't emotional stuff, it wasn't physical stuff, it was just something else. And I said to him, what is that? What is going on? And he kind of explained that this was energy and trauma, basically stress, trauma moving through the body and moving out through the body. And that began what I can only describe as an exciting, fascinating, very, very tough journey actually into myself, which continues, especially right now. We're taking it to a whole new level. And one of the things I think that where I am now, I've kind of realised is, I had thought that you get to this place of done all of it, it's all fine, all healed, all sorted, I'm spiritual in inverted commas now. And through the different practices that I learned, and so that basically, that original healing changed the path of my life. And I kind of became very discontent with all of the normal stuff that we think our life is meant to be made up of, you know, the 9-to-5 job, going to the gym, whatever it happens to be, that whole routine, that framework that we're living in. And so that's what took me into learning knowledge and practicing different healing modalities. And I moved into Reiki and quantum touch, mediumship, and sort of sitting in spiritual circles. And again, I thought, I found it, that's my, I'm here, I found my calling. And again, it wasn't enough. I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to learn more. And it just seemed to be this never-ending process of exploration, excavation, highs and lows, not in the kind of adrenaline way, just life taking on a very different meaning. And the realization that actually the idea that life is meant to be and looks a certain way, and when it looks that way, everything is, you know, you're successful, you've made it. You're in a joyful state all the time. It just, to me, it doesn't feel like that's reality. The nature of our very experience here is to experience both ends of the spectrum. And I'm beginning to come to terms with that and learn that more and more with the work that I'm doing with clients, and also, but really with myself, making friends with myself and all the parts of myself that are here on this journey on earth at this time.
And of all the times you chose to incarnate in earth, it's like, you know what, spirit or whoever's going to bring me onto the earth plane, I fancy being around and quite aware around about the 2020, 22 mark, if you don't mind.
I know. I'm sure we knew. I mean, there's no doubt that we must have known, you know, if you you kind of have a belief, or you know that's your understanding, that as souls we're here to expand consciousness, and we choose timelines, I guess, or choose ancestral lines to come into at particular times to have the opportunity to pass the exam, do a certain bit of work. So yeah, I do kind of partly love that idea, because it means that we are equipped and we do know what we're doing here. But there's the other part of me that kind of sort of says, really? No, I wouldn't have chosen this. But that's my limited self that can't see the bigger picture of what's happening.
I have those same things where you're just like, why? But then thinking about where we were, like even 2019, even though like personally 2019 was a bit of a shit show, is just everyone was kind of getting around, going through life, like getting from A to B and just trying to hit these benchmarks that had been set up for us to, like, do this by then, do that by then, do that by then. And I wasn't hitting any of those benchmarks anyway. So I was like an abject failure as it was, because my life didn't look how it should do already. So, and then this thing just literally just tore the veil down, like on a bigger scale, because there were always people that were never fit in, never really ran the course that we were supposed to do, and always had ideas of things not being as they were being presented. But then it just kind of opened it up to really play itself out. Like it was always playing out in the background, like on low volume, that, it's like, that's not really the way things are, but there was no proof of it really. Whereas now it's like, it's not in one of the side theatre, it's like the main show. Yeah. The main show is like, it is bullshit. Everything that we've believed about the way that society should be, the way that our experience should be as a human being, is we're being shown this and we're being forced to look. Our heads are turned in that direction, and some of us are looking at face on and just going, oh my God. And then others are still like just like putting their hands like going, it's not happening, it's not happening, it's not happening. And I know that anyone who's seeing it just goes through periods of like, oh my God, it's really happening. Total frustration, especially when now it becomes more and more clear how big the deception is on mankind. But it just seems like, I don't know, I don't know what you're feeling around that, because you just look at and go like, this is like blatantly a lie.
Yeah, I loved what you said, because you said that it's kind of been on low volume, and I think that's a really good way to put it, because even some of us who've been doing spiritual work or been exploring alternate ways of doing life, or slightly off the mainstream, I don't think many of us, and I suppose I can't speak for everyone, but I don't think many of us were in the position of, we knew there was a bit of deception over here, we knew that this was over there, we knew we didn't trust this, we knew that there were other ways to do things, but we kind of still had like our big toe in the matrix, and maybe our left arm or whatever. And so it wasn't until 2019 that we had the opportunity, well, I know I certainly had the opportunity straight away to go, oh my God, this is completely insane. There was no proof, there was no nothing. It was just, I knew in my core this was completely an utter lie. And so through this last couple of years, I think we literally, the volume's been turned up and up and up, because like you say, we're being given the opportunity to look, or to keep burying our heads in the sand. And we've come so far away from what life's meant to be like. And I say meant, not that it's a framework thing, but it certainly isn't get up, survive, go to work from between these hours, come home, have your dinner, go to the gym, watch television, go to sleep, and repeat, and outsource all of your wisdom and power and decisions to something outside of yourself. And we've just come so far away from it that it's almost like whatever has happened, I think as well, we've got this, I think we've reached a critical point where there was enough of us that had an awareness to be able to hold the space for this pantomime to start playing out, really, really ramping up what was happening, because you're right, it has, people describe it as clown earth, because it has become so obvious to those who see, yet to many who are caught in their small self fear, basically, and the programming around fear, that they still can't see it. And for the first couple of years, I know personally I got really frustrated, which was my own work to do around my own fear, because when I started to look at what was really triggering me, I found that what I came back to was also fear, which is the same thing that's driving this whole thing. It's ultimately fear or love and power, fear and disempowerment and codependency and reliance on this outside force. And it's been quite amazing so far. And I'm kind of coming to terms with the idea that it's going to get worse. Yeah. And I'm now also kind of, whereas those first 2 years were a lot of inner work and looking at what was being triggered in me, what needed to be healed within me, I've kind of come through that bit, ready for the next phase, she says, but feeling much more empowered than I ever was at the beginning of that. The process that it's led me through, the depths of the darkness have equally got the peaks in this other space of power and joy and sovereignty, which I couldn't possibly have imagined were going to come out of that process. So I think until each and every one of us is prepared to go into those kind of depths and consider that things are not as they seem, it's going to keep playing out. And I feel like we have to hold as much power and truth and light as we can without getting dragged into our own fear stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I hear a lot of that. And if I talk about what personally, like when it comes to frustration, I recognize frustration is something that comes up in me a lot. And when I was speaking to a friend of mine who does human design, my understanding of human design is literally the surface, so I can't really go past that. But she, just going by the type that I am and like some numbers, she was saying like every time you feel frustration, it's a moment for you to move, because a lot of the time I'm one to like sit in the I'm frustrated, and just kind of wallow in the frustration and think that I'm going to be able to create from a point of frustration, where if I think of the times that I'm always frustrated in a situation, it's like either I'm not communicating in an effective way, or I'm staying around in something out of fear. Because I'm like, the frustration is there because like this is not your space anymore, and what you've got to do is you've got to walk away, and you've got to walk away into that space of like nothingness. You've got to take a walk of faith into that space. Also, partly as well, how my ego was playing a lot of the time into situations where I wanted to be like, come on now, you can't keep believing that they, and it was all about, I wanted to be the one that I wanted it to be my words that, I said something to someone and then the scales came off their eyes and like, oh my God, I'm awakened. Thank you, Carol. If I hadn't spoken to you, I would spend the rest of my incarnation in slumber and in the third dimension, and it's not like that at all. So it's lessons to learn that sometimes you've got to let go and let people go through the pain of their own, and I mean this in the most lovingly way, of their own ignorance, basically, and watch them. And if it means that they have to make the most painful mistakes that cost them so many things, you have to respectfully and lovingly allow them to put their hand in the fire and get burnt, and we don't want to see people go through pain. That's partly, there's an element of us that are doing it out of, you don't want to see people get hurt, but the only way we learn a lot of the time is by our experience and the pain that we have. I recognize what frustration means, the lesson that frustration means to me, what it brings up, and it means that just step back and still put things out there, but put it out in a way that will maybe just get people to kind of like question, as opposed to it, but I'm just going to put something there and what do you think about that? You don't even have to tell me. It's just kind of just jolting the cage a little bit, just jolting the cage and running away, as opposed to like shaking it and going, do you see it yet? Can't you tell?
No.
leaving the crumbs. And I can't remember who said this now, but it's one of those big philosophers saying sometimes you've got to realize that you plant the seeds to the tree that you might not even sit under the shade of. And this is what we have to get to, the point that we leave those seeds and then walk away. We're not going to get someone phone them and go, oh my God, Carol, if it wasn't for you, it's like it may never happen in your lifetime.
But I think there's the part of us, the kind of, let's call it the ego part of us, that wants to see results.
Yeah.
Wants to know that, A plus B has made C, and that's all good. And I loved what you said, because you said something that really resonated, which is that, from frustration to faith. And I think that's actually a really, really fundamental thing, because whatever we're experiencing, what I learned was, whenever I went into my frustration or what was I annoyed about, there are the universe presents you with mirrors and reflections in different ways. Sometimes it's stuff that we need to heal. Sometimes it's stuff we need to see within ourselves. There's lots of different mirrors. But one of the things that I kind of noticed was that even if I delved deeper and deeper and went through the layers of, well, why am I annoyed about that? Well, it's because of that. Okay, but why am I annoyed about that? Because of that. And because I would come back to pretty much the same fear, let's say, as the person who I was frustrated with. Right. It was almost mirror for mirror. So just to give you an example, I would get really triggered by the way that people used to look at me when I wasn't wearing a mask. And I'd get really, really triggered by it. And I had to do lots of work around that. And I found that there was still this frustration. And so I kind of sat down and went, so what's the frustration? Can't they see that it's harmful for them? It's not helping anyone. It's not preventing any transmission of anything. And then I'd kind of said to myself, okay, so people can't see all the time. People, let's put ignorant or stupid in the most loving way all the time. We all are, from in all different walks of life. So I don't get frustrated or annoyed with everyone who I think in that moment is acting ignorantly or stupidly. I just let it go. It's their life, nothing to do with it. Why is this my business? So I went, okay, so this is my business. Why is it my business? Because ultimately I'm afraid that their compliance is going to affect me. And actually it's going to cause me danger. Right. So ironically, as I got to that point, I kind of laughed. So this person behind the mask is afraid that I'm not wearing a mask and I'm putting them in danger in the present moment. But I'm looking at this person in a mask and I'm thinking that their compliance is putting me in danger in the future, not even in the present moment. And it was this realization that I was giving all my power away to something, A, that hadn't happened, and B, that I was a part of creating. And so it was coming back to, this is all story, it's all projection, it hasn't happened. And I'm a powerful creator and I'm giving my power away to something outside of myself. But that's set in stone because, 20 people over there have got masks on, so this is what's going to happen. Well, it's just absolute nonsense, because each and every one of us is creating from the frequency that we're operating at. So if I just contribute to this frequency with more fear for a completely different reason, right, it makes no difference. So it's that coming back to that faith of everything's going to be okay. Because if I just embody the true essence of who I am, which is infinitely powerful and a creator, then that's the biggest contribution I can have here. But the ego doesn't like that, because there's no results. There's no box for it or framework.
Yeah. I hear you on that. And what I've also noticed as well, I'm sure everyone has experienced that, is how revealing it's been to, talking of masks, taking off our masks, the figurative mask that we've all been wearing in the world, what it's really done to like long-term relationships, long-term thoughts and beliefs that we've had about certain people in our lives, even where you've just been like, I thought you were the intelligent one, I thought you were the, and suddenly you see underneath exactly who people are being. The observation / judgment is such a fine-tooth comb, isn't it, really? But it's been a lot where I've just been looking at how we've all cloaked ourselves in persona in order to kind of get along. And now that truth is being revealed on the external world, in the external world, how it's also kind of ripping our personas and our masks. And now we're having the opportunity to be true. And and if you're able to, and if you choose to kind of just speak from that place of truth, which is like scary at the beginning because you get so much lashback as a result, then the more that you kind of move into that space and start speaking, people kind of find you on a different level. The people that you thought and you kind of looked up to, and that even within our own lives, but also when we externally acquiesce to government or celebrity and gave them the power of our guidance and knowing, once we've kind of realized, like, I mean, it's a shock really. It's kind of finding out that your parents are human when you kind of realize that those voices that you put up there for like a lifetime even actually are singing to a completely different hymn sheet. They don't have your best interests or growth in mind, and having to grow up and mature from that level. And for some of us, it's been like, wow, okay, I've had to drop people really quickly. But for some, there's been a lot of disappointment, I'd say, as well, for people, especially that I held in high esteem. Wouldn't know me in the street, but musicians or public figures that I thought were one way. And then when you really discover that actually that's not who they are, they've been pretending this whole time, and what they represent actually as a result has been deceiving you to actually cover up for something really dark. But then, like you're saying, the mirror is being like, okay, what darkness is it revealing about my own self? We're feeling our way in the dark almost, but it's actually we're going into the light.
Any kind of foundation that we were resting on of the old world, let's call it the old world, the old ways, is literally being shaken to the core. And so with all the, this work that we're doing constantly, it's chaos. It's just chaos in every moment. Nothing is certain. And the more that we try to cling on to the certainty and the security of the ways that we've been living all this time, I think the more that we're going to suffer. Right. And you were talking about what came up when I was listening to was attachment. Is this attachment to other people that we have, particularly family or people that we consider, as in a special place in our lives, and letting go of the attachment to what they do, what they think, who we think they are in our lives, and coming back to experiencing it as a soul rather than a daughter or a sister or whatever we happen to be. And the same when speaking with people that perhaps are not so close to us. Something somebody said to me was, when you're trying to talk to someone about, that you think this isn't real and da-da-da-da and whatever information it is you're sharing, how do you share it? And I was aware that the way that I would share it in the beginning primarily was, I really need you to get this. I really need you to get this. So the energy that was coming was, can't you see this? And there's this and this, and it was this really, and there's nothing wrong with that in itself, but I was attached to that person getting it. Whereas I wasn't just sharing it from my absolute truth. This is my truth. I'm not attached to what you think about it. I'm not attached to how you receive it. I'm not attached to what you do with it. And it's a completely different energy and it's a completely different frequency. And so I haven't mastered it, but I learned very quickly after some tough conversations that there was either no point because this person, for whatever reason, wasn't prepared to take the blinkers off. And going back to something you said earlier about this pantomime, and equally they're all playing their part, because for this kind of show to play out, the dark has to come into full awareness, and the only way we can see that is if we've got players willing to play the roles of the dark. And the dark can simply just be subconscious, unconscious behaviors and giving away our power to authority figures and not remembering that we're sovereign creators. That is, because your light is in the dark and you are fully embedded and enmeshed in your human self and don't remember who you are. So in a way, it helps me to remember when I get frustrated as well, as everybody is literally playing their part as an actor, as an avatar. And I don't want anyone to suffer, but one of my my colleagues always says, I give you the dignity of your own fate. It really helps me to remember that, particularly when it's someone that I care about and I feel like I'm invested in some way, is to step back and remember that as a soul, this is your own journey and your own path, and the choices that you make will contribute to this collective, and the choices and the frequency that I operate at will be the only thing that affects the collective.
Yeah,
it's not easy.
No, not at all.
It's like not easy, which is why I think it's really important to have some practices that you can ground yourself in, so that you remember that where your power is.
Everyone's talking about step into your power. I think that in itself is a beautiful saying, and sometimes things are said without maybe the explanation or the understanding of what it means, or it's maybe used inappropriately as well. I've been around times where I've just been sharing with somebody, and it's not that I'm sharing from a disempowered point. I've just been like, I'm just going to tell you where I was like 2 or 3 steps before I got to this place. I'm just going to like share this story because I feel safe enough to share. And maybe they're not hearing me, or maybe I'm not explaining myself clearly enough, because then they're receiving it as like whining or me being in this kind of like fear, and they'll be like, oh, step into your power. And you're like, okay, you just didn't get what I was trying to say. Certain kind of like buzzwords and terminologies and things that just kind of get like whipped around, especially in the spiritual community, that don't often give people the opportunity to kind of just, I think we're all racing to want to be this awakened, enlightened, empowered all the time, where sometimes we've got to give ourselves the opportunity to just, talk about the moments where it's not always felt great with that, and hearing that.
Listening to you, the one thing that pops up into my mind is, do we see vulnerability and honesty and truth as something that's disempowering, or do we see it as our ultimate superpower? To me, I now see it as the ultimate superpower, to be able to acknowledge, witness, be present with the parts of me that, last week I was really depressed, last week I couldn't get out of bed, whatever it is, because I'm honoring those parts from a place of power, from a place of strength, because I experienced them, they were real, and I know that the only way for me to move forward is to do that. And so I think when we talk to people who maybe come at you with that response, get on with it, step into your power, it's completely dishonoring the vulnerability and the truth that I think we need so much more of in the world, because we've got this persona and this facade. And I would probably say that it's more likely to be that the other person is projecting because they can't face their own vulnerability. So it's a shadow. We can't see that in another, because we don't want to acknowledge that we have that, I'm going to say weakness in inverted commas, because it's not a weakness, but perhaps to that person it's perceived as it's weak to be, just get on with it, man up, whatever it is. Like words like that, they completely disempower, because for me, authenticity is the most powerful thing. And that means embracing the whole spectrum and being able to step out of the persona which wants to stay safe and within this kind of framework of what that looks like and what you're supposed to be like in society, and stepping into all parts of you that you're experiencing and allowing that to have airtime. For me, that's the most powerful thing. But it takes practice to be able to get that, and with the right people.
Yeah. And I think that's because I've always been the get on, do on, and someone who I always kind of show up with in like kind of like everything together, moving forward, it's all good. Just one day kind of just like pulled me off track by just going, are you okay? It was like, are you okay? I see what you're going through. I know what you've had to go through over the past couple of years. I recognize that it's not been easy for you. I've seen how you're trying to show up. And in that moment, it just like pulled me off guard. And I was like, my immediate response was like, yeah, I'm all right. And then like, I kind of like took a moment, and then I was like, oh, because it was like, oh my gosh, someone's allowing you to tell them if you're not okay. And in that moment I was okay, but it was just that recognition of the fact that I've seen what you're trying to do with your life, and I recognize that, and I know that it can't be easy. Are you okay?
You've been seen. It's one of the most powerful things to be seen. We hide. It's coming back to that mask thing. We're hiding. We literally do say, I'm fine. That is the standard response. If we were to really say, someone said to me, say, how are you? I'm pretty sure my answer wouldn't be, I'm fine. It would probably be along the lines of, it'd probably be WTF, what the fuck? It'd be, I don't know what it would be, but it certainly wouldn't be, I'm fine. And so, but we have to be willing to be seen, or have those friends that see us when we are slightly in our masculine, I suppose, the doing.
Right.
And they come at it from that really soft, are you okay? And it can just melt all the barriers of connection.
Yeah, it got me. And it was a guy who said it to me. It was a guy friend, and it was by text. So it wasn't even a conversation. And I just looked at the message and went, actually, do you know what? And it's like it's been, and I think what we all need to acknowledge within ourselves is that we're living through extremely traumatic times at the moment. And what we're witnessing on a psychological level, we've not had a moment to kind of just sit back, because it's just been like round one, round two, and and things, like you say, are going to get much realer. But what we can do is kind of prepare ourselves mentally, and as much as we can do on the physical level to kind of prepare ourselves for where we're going to go. We're watching all of this psychosis and madness happen around us. If we're always in pursuit of the truth, watching the lies coming at us 24/7 is actually frustrating and traumatic. I think we need to acknowledge that we are sitting in some madness, and it's hard to be around the madness all the time and keep your head when you see what's going on around you.
How much do you immerse yourself in the madness? How much do we need to know? Obviously, from a practical standpoint, there's certain things that we are thinking, well, maybe I'll just do that, and maybe I'll do that just in case. But again, it comes back to this, what's taking you away from your creative power? Because, if you look at it if we go all the way into the kind of quantum perspective of this, the fact that each and every one of us, that's all there is. Nothing exists outside of us. Everything is this almost like a holographic universe. Everything's a projection from my point, my stillness point, through the lenses of my perception, through my body, through my karma, through my subconscious patterns, through my programming, through all my senses. This is my reality. And yet everyone around me also is creating their realities, and we're kind of all avatars in each other's world, and it's totally mind-boggling. I just can't get our minds around it, and we're probably not meant to. But again, it's that balance between, okay, this is happening on the outside, but it's not fixed. What happens tomorrow isn't fixed. What happens in the next moment isn't fixed. What is going to influence that the most is my state of being. And so for me, what I've kind of, to some people, I suppose, looks like maybe, well, how can you operate in the world if you're not informed and you don't know what's happening here or what's happening there and what's happening in Ukraine and whatever it happens to be? And I absolutely have no idea what narrative is being broadcast on the news, because I simply will not watch it in any shape or form, because it's not going to serve me personally, because I know that it's going to be for one primary purpose only, to create distraction and fear. And it works, because the moment that I see a headline, I go into, I know it's not real, I know it's not true, or I question its authority. And in the next moment, that part of me that's going, yeah, but what if? And in that moment, I've lost my connection to source. I've lost my connection to my creative power. I've been swallowed into this narrative over here, and I've given it my power, which is my energy. And so the last maybe few months particularly, this is for me personally, and I'm not saying everybody should do this, everyone has to do whatever is right for them. it's taken a real step back from anything that distracts me, because the more and more that I sit in my own space and cultivate and create and not dissociate. I'm not saying don't participate. I'm not saying don't challenge the systems. I'm not saying don't use common law or, extricate yourself from this matrix. But I'm just saying that what for me a big learning has been, if it takes me into fear and projections in the future, it's a distraction. Right. And that's the distraction that's going to keep this going. The more that I dip my toes in that, the more fuel it has, the longer it goes on. And for my own health and well-being, and also for what happens in the future of humanity, the best thing I can do is to stick all of my faith and keep going back into that empty space of shit, but I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but trust that it'll be fine. Yeah. One way or another, it'll be fine. And that's really quite an amazing thing to be able to do, because there's so much fear out there. I get, conversations where people do try a local tennis club to kind of, this is happening and something needs to be done. It's this big drama. And it's come at me and I've gone, I don't watch mainstream media. I'm not the best person to talk to about it, because I don't believe in the truth, that the news is telling the truth. And I've literally been faced with this blank look and then turn to the next person and repeat exactly the same storyline, because it's an addiction to drama, an addiction to this righteous anger. And again, that there's this goodie over here and a baddie over there, because then while I'm distracted with all this, I don't have to face myself, which is the ultimate facing, and we touched on it earlier, the darkness within, the capacity that we all have to be, evil or good.
But it's so magnetic, the play of this whole drama of like, this is the good guy, this is the bad guy, this is the thing, fortunately for for the people who are perpetuating the whole drama, is it relies on people having very little information and awareness of what the truth may be, or certain facts, and we don't have to be into European history or anything like that. The little bits of time that you do have, you allow your reality to be created for you. So then you don't know yourself from the next news bulletin, or because you just don't have time. And also because you've spent your entire life being fed who and what you are and who you are and who you should be. You don't even trust that, because you don't even know what that feels like. I just feel, for whatever reason, lucky that I was a bit of a dreamer and just off in the clouds all the time as well, because I really got to know myself, and I know what my own kind of like bullshit detector kind of was just like wavering over certain things and going, I'm not really sure, I really feel for people who are having to exist in that fight or flight moment at the time, because they're just being played. It's really hard to see, but until that breaking point comes, and who knows what that breaking point is going to be. For some, it's like, okay, they lost their business or their job, or they or they got vax injured, or someone in their family happened. Or for some people, even all of that can be happening, and that still won't be enough, or it may never be enough. They might have to experience complete total annihilation. Such an interesting time, because it just feels like suddenly the world has become more of a spiritual place. I don't know how else to explain it. It's like you can almost see energies around people and hear more of who people are, or where they're at, or what their fears are, by them just saying like 2 or 3 words, or reacting to something I say, and I'll be like, okay, this is as far as I need to go here. We have to give ourselves a lot more credit for the space that we're holding right now, because we are holding steadfast in a world that's like spiraling as it's destroying itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm reminded of someone, they're not my words, but if there's a room and it's in the darkness, it only takes one candle and the darkness is extinguished. I think for me, particularly in the beginning, I'd kind of thought, there's this whole pool of darkness over here, and then there's this light over here, and how do we get rid of the darkness? But you don't get rid of the darkness. It doesn't matter how much darkness there is, we just need more light. So for me, then it makes sense again that, okay, so if I just keep making sure that I am trying to create more light within myself and look at where my darkness is, then as a collective, we reach this point where the room is all in light, even though there was still all this darkness there that hasn't found any light within itself. This, let's say, group or collective over here have shone so brightly because they've not been distracted by this darkness that literally it just changes in an instant. And I think that's a really hard thing for us to, on a mental level and our egos to get our head around, that it could be that simple, because we're like, well, no, that needs to be done and that needs to be done. How's that going to dismantle and how's that? And it's this whole process, and nothing here is really linear, is it? So it's that bringing that element in of complete and utter alchemy and transformation in a split second that we're all capable of. And when do we reach that tipping point? So it is a task, because we have to face our own darkness, and instead of maybe focusing on why someone else isn't, why are they not looking at their own darkness, like you say, there's so many people aren't going to see it, aren't going to see that they're completely hypnotized. And maybe they're not meant to. Maybe in this lifetime they're not meant to. Their path is simply to be a space holder in the capacity they're holding, which is enabling the light, because without the contrast, again, we don't realize, without connection, we don't realize how disconnected we are.
Right.
And I can experience connection and disconnection in the space of a minute, and it's, again, noticing that and becoming aware of that. And what you were talking about, this practice of an inner dialogue with myself, an inner awareness, an inner exploration. And we are taught literally to fill our heads with information that we are taught in schools. This is how life looks. This is what you do every day. These are who you outsource all of you go to the doctor for that. You listen to the government for that. And the TV tells you that. There we go. It's all nice and packaged. And to burst that bubble normally comes from suffering. If I look at my own life, the biggest changes and shifts in transformation have come from suffering. Okay, I'd rather it hadn't had to come that way, but and I don't believe it has to come that way, but I do believe that for the majority of us, for a certain part of our life, suffering in some way is the biggest catalyst for us to start to question. And unfortunately, it seems like that's just going to get worse for some people. And again, it's this real paradox that actually nothing exists outside of ourselves. So we really are, the moment that we step into things being a fixed reality and a fixed way of happening, in a way that's an illusion, because there's only me or there's only you, and all together we're creating this fluid experience of life, which is so hard to conceptualize and to get your head around and to deal with. Because look outside, there's a car there, there's a brick wall, there's windows, there's a computer, there's a solid table, there's a chair, and I've got a body, and all these things are really real. But when we connect in through meditation to the source of who we are, that goes beyond the body, beyond the room, and isn't describable or even explainable, then there's that window into, things aren't quite what I thought they were.
And I don't know, you just know it's real when suddenly, if someone kind of wants to have a conversation about something, you just feel like you've just kind of been sucked back into and pulled back into something really, really heavy. And this is, conversations that I'm having with people about things that feel so real to them, even people that are more awake but still wanting to talk about things. I'm like, well, maybe we can let this one go. I know how real you want to talk about how hurt you are about this thing and the division that's been created and your experience as a result of the division and men and women and black and white and up and down and all of these things. I'm like, what if it's not a thing? The times when I've brought that one forward, it's still holding on. I'm like, but as long as we keep holding on to that thing, it's a thing, we're not going to go anywhere. It's like, who knows how wide we can go? It's like, we can look at it from, yes, you know, we're experiencing that, and we've got this and that, and that's happening there, and these, you know, these things are out there to try and kill us, and we're all taking that. And then we pull back a little bit, and we're getting more in tune to who we are as sovereign beings. And then we pull back a little bit and go, well, come outside of the refines of the body. Who are we on a spiritual level? Keep going wider and wider and wider and wider, and you see and you feel and you experience a bigger experience. It's so light there. And then you wake up and you're like, oh, right, okay, I'm still here. But, you know, you kind of get those moments of just knowing that you can really like expand and experience it from such a wide angle, from such, and then you see the density that people are trapped in, but it feels so real. So I get it.
You know, I'm not at all dismissing the experience of suffering or pain or you know, all the things that we're experiencing, because they're very real. It's why we come here, to have a body so that we can experience, but ideally not get stuck in them. And so this point that you're talking about, you know, going back and back and back to source, to a place that doesn't get sick, doesn't know depression, doesn't know division, doesn't know fear, this pure infinite field of potential and, you know, just possibility we can't even imagine, comes through these, however it works, but in the, you know, most basic way that we can get our heads round, through the lenses of perception, through our programming, through our body, through our thoughts, and we create reality from that all the way down. So the more that we can clear those channels, the more that we can be aware of, okay, but here I've got stuck in this illusion here because that's what I learned, or because that's what I experienced, or because there's that trauma there that's being re-triggered and I'm repeating it because that's the only way my body knows how to punch me and go, come on, you need to release this over here. So we'll experience it again until you realise that there's some over here that still needs to come out. Yeah. So I really like that description, because it's really accurate. Whenever we are stuck in something, we're at one of those places and we've lost that thread to that place. And the moment that we reconnect that thread, and it's never really disconnected, it's impossible, it's the only thing that's really real, but the moment that we find a space in the window to come back and connect to that thread, then we can see those lenses and experience the emotions, experience the pain in a slightly different way than if we're completely consumed by it because we believe that that's who we are. Right. And that doesn't mean that, you know, I'm certainly not saying that in some of my purges I've got completely lost in them, because they've been so overwhelming. There's been such a well of purging that needed to be done, grief, whatever it was. I didn't even know what it was about. I could conceptualize it with my mind, but there wasn't a point, because what needed to happen was that well just needed to empty a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. So the next time I was faced with a situation, there was nothing in the well to overfill, to kind of overflow. And then I realized that was the work. Yeah. That was the work. Oh, I'm really angry with this person today. What mirror is it? Well, actually, it's not a mirror. Well, have I created it? Well, I have created it, but I've created it so that I can release something in a way that is going to serve me and hopefully humanity. Yeah. But I don't think anyone can say it's easy, even with all the tools, which is why having a tribe as well of people around you and a community is so important. And in the last couple of years, you know, I've got really close friends that were on the same page anyway, but our kind of group has expanded out, and we're now looking at life in a different way. Like, how can we support each other? So what might we need in the future if this whole system is going to be dismantled? Well, why don't you grow some potatoes and I'll grow some onions, and I'll do this and I'll do that, and I can do that and I can do this. And it's just this, I don't know, it's just a completely different way of living. It doesn't mean that we're going to go back to that and stay there, but again, I feel like that keeps the ego part of the mind quiet, because like, well, okay, we've got a little plan. So if that happens, we're okay. We're supported. And then at the same time, you can go back, but I'm still a creator over here. And I still believe everything's going to be okay.
When you start creating on that level, that kind of, you find your community and your tribe and the people that you can just speak to and with ease. You're just, you don't feel like there's any barrier to your conversation. And it's not even about being around people who agree 100%. It's just being respectful of different perspectives and being respectful of people's journey, and when they get a little bit trapped in certain things, and honoring them when they're having a bad day and not taking it personally as well. Sometimes people might be working through, like, they kind of got their claws got caught in a little thing and they're working through it, and they've kind of spat out or lashed out at you in a way that's not about you. It's just they're like dealing with some stuff. And for us to be really strong in ourselves so that we're not taking every single thing personally. If we think about the way that the systems have been created, they've been created to be centralized and so distant from us that we don't feel like we have any control about anything. But the basics that we need, things that we can do, we can grow our own food. And then something else I was looking at, finding your tribe, building your community. And should, like, for instance, the financial system break down, it's like, do we actually really need money? Do we need money? We don't need money. What we need is like ways of exchange, ways that we can gift. What can you bring into the community? What skills do you have? Then somebody else can come in and kind of fill in the gaps that you don't have, parts that we need, and we can create from that without worrying about how much you've got on a financial level, because ultimately it's paper, and more and more it's paper, because they're just literally printing it, so it's not backed by anything. So what we need to come into all of this new system, these new communities and this new world that we're bringing, is just bringing it with, what can you contribute? And then if you can't contribute at that moment in time, maybe it's your time to receive. And when you feel filled up, then you'll be able to give. Sometimes you just need to be poured into, either from yourself or from the community. And this is where the shifts are happening. And I can see how it's uncomfortable for some people, because it's like, well, I've spent 10, 15, 20 years building up my bank account, and I've got the car and the house and all the bits. But when we kind of pull away from it, do you feel rich as a result, like on a deep level? Do you feel abundant from that point of view? Those are the things that I'm seeing that people are now having that conversation of, like, what does that look like? Where do we need to be? Is it just a space that we're at on a mental and spiritual and energetic level? It's like, how does that create itself so it's new and exciting? And then also it's like, how do we do this? Because it's so different.
And it's a lot to do as well, because life's been quite convenient in many ways for us, and we like our convenience. And I'm aware that this new world that's being created, I have no idea what it's going to look like. The only thing that I can be probably quite sure about is that we'll have more responsibility, or we'll take more responsibility for our health. We'll be able to tap more into the earth in a much healthier way. We might tap into the miraculous powers that we have within us, supporting each other rather than being enslaved by another. I think will probably be a really big thing. But again, there's this, I found myself saying to someone the other day, I was like, well, we'll grow our own vegetables, and we were all chatting, and it was like, really daunting. Oh God, I've got to grow vegetables as well as try and extricate myself from the matrix and work and pay bills and stay sane. And I said, yeah, but I really like shoes, so I still want to be able to get really nice shoes in this new world and buy new shoes. And I just had to laugh at myself, because again, there's this idea that in this new world we have to in some way go back to a society that's basic. I don't think we do. Abundance is the society that we're moving into, but in a way that our creative power and our time is used in a way where it's so much more rewarding, rather than being a slave to earn bits of paper that have absolutely no value whatsoever, and stop us from actually sitting out in the sun and spending a whole day doing nothing, because we don't need to, because we've got food, got nice power from the sun, got water. I don't have to pay all these ridiculous bills that are made up just to enslave me.
Totally illegal.
So I can actually sit and just have a cup of tea and do nothing all day and do some painting. What do I feel like doing? I mean, it's such an alien concept, an alien way of living, because we are just working within these frameworks of you do a job from 9 to 5 and this is what it looks like. And if you don't, then you'll never make it. You're lazy. What you're doing with your life, whatever the stories are. But God, can you imagine a world where we could wake up in the morning and, decide what our soul and our spirit and our personality wanted to do for that day? Because we know we've got food and we know we can then trade with someone for, something that we've got for something or whatever system comes in. But I just think it'll be a system where we're not enslaved. That's the only thing I'm hopeful for, is that part of the system will go, because the more that I learn about it, and again, I'm really just at the beginning of learning about the financial systems and dipping my toes into natural law, and it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It's utterly mind-blowing. And again, I want to tell everyone about it, but
they're not. Yeah, it's
not ready.
There's no reason to. But I just find it fascinating, the dark and the light of it, the systems that have been created to kind of encapsulate you, and when you really kind of pull back, you're like, if it wasn't so evil, it's genius. It's genius, But like the way that this whole thing has been created, and ultimately where it's come from is by people, I'll say that in inverted commas, who have an awareness of the power and the creative power of human beings, knowing that if you can convince them of certain things, they'll create their own prison for you, because they're not really doing anything much. The ideas are being fed out there, and then, like you say, we're creating it. Like, the narratives pushed on on the television, and then everyone reacts as a result, because it's all come from here. So if that's off, imagine if the electricity goes down and we've got no electric. Oh my God, like everyone, we're going to panic. But then what you'd have to create as a result of that, you'd be forced to create. And I think we think that without, the financial structure and the gas system and the water, all these things, that we'd be living spit and polish lives like cavemen. Maybe not. Maybe there's more out there. Maybe there's more that's possible in terms of our creativity. Maybe power is created in a completely different way than the way that we've been told. When you start looking into what do we really know about our history as human beings on the face of the planet, it's like, maybe we're not so primitive after all, or maybe previous to this we weren't so primitive, and the life that we're living now, even though we think that we are technologically advanced, is actually super primitive in comparison to where we've come from, and that has been skewed. So I think just thinking, sometimes when people go like, if you're not in the system, where will you be? And thinking that you're going to be living in the woods and just like wiping yourself with a tree leaf every time you go to the lake. It could just be a little bit more than that. When I think, and not to make it political, but it's just kind of like to balance it with when they're thinking, oh, we're taking Facebook out and Netflix and McDonald's away from the Russians. I'm like, that's actually a good thing. How are you punishing them? If we didn't have McDonald's, if we didn't have Netflix, if we didn't have Facebook or any of those things, would it be so bad? What you're trying to take away from people is actually liberating them. I've got hope for it. Like, I don't know how it goes through. This is after my first time around in an awakening and a shifting of times. I just think it's possible. And when I have conversations with people who spend their time going, what can we do? We've got a level of excitement. We've also got an awareness of how, depending on where your attention is, what the road ahead could look like and how painful it may be for a lot of people. But then also, when those people actually, or if they do have their moment of like, unplug from the system, they're going to need somewhere to go. They're like, okay, so we can't stay here. Where do we go? And all of us, pioneers of like we'll build this new thing, are just going to be doing something over here, that we're getting to the point of like, now is the time to make that happen. Whenever in our lifetime have we been in this space that we need to change the world right now?
Yeah, you can't turn away from it. Well, some people are, but we literally cannot turn away. And so it's that creating of that space of some ideas of what it could look like. But you know what? I bet they're just the tip of the iceberg, because if we use our lenses of what's on the outside to think how we might create a future, it's quite limited by the technologies and the way that the mind perceives our reality. But, that source and that access to inner technology to create, I absolutely have no doubt that there will be forms of power and technology that we, can't possibly imagine at this point in time. But the more that we go in instead of out, and the more that we focus in, the more that we tap into those technologies, the more that they can become manifest through each and every one of us. And I suppose that's really exciting, because looking at it through the lens of where we're at in a 3D space is a little bit more daunting, because it feels linear and it feels like, well, that has to happen for that to happen. And then if that happens, what happens there? And then how do we do that? And that's all, again, that's just a fake construct.
Right.
So, yeah, it does feel, I agree with you. It's exciting, and it's also a roller coaster, and it can be really tough sometimes for all of this talk about, stepping into our creative power and remembering that we have so much capacity to change our reality and take responsibility and make different choices. The real experience of being human on Earth in 2022, and all the triggering and all of the stuff that is coming at us constantly to be processed, to challenge us. Okay, come back to yourself again. Oh, it got lost there. Oh, okay, over here. What's missing here? Oh, okay, there's another thing over there. And just to keep coming back. It's like going to the gym and doing weights every day, and just it never ending and working a different muscle. And it's like, will it stop?
No.
Not for a while. And that's probably why we're here, because maybe somewhere that we maybe haven't tapped into yet, we've got, each and every one of us has got some unique gift to bring to be a part of creating this new world together.
Yeah, and witness it, and be open to there just being like a left field intervention of some sort.
I'm optimistic for that.
Oh, it could be anything. It could be anything. It could be anything, and it's just like, but we've got to do our bit. We can't just sit there and wait for something to swoop in and go, okay, like it's over. It's got to be a dual effort in terms of, people, you get helped when you show that you're actually making an effort. Amazing times, frustrating times, maddening times, just a mix of so much. But I can't ever remember a time when it's been like this in my life, that it's not only just me going through my own internal and kind of trying to grow spiritually. I'm like seeing it on so many people are experiencing it. So there's places to have conversations now, people to have conversations with.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this earlier, and I think it's a really important thing, is the division's been such a big thing. And so respecting where I'm at, where you're at, what's going on for you, and acknowledging the parts of me that resist that, or that don't like that, or even are disliking of that. The parts of me, I've really had to face some parts of myself that I didn't want to acknowledge. And what I really, really, I suppose, for myself, I'm working on most of all is how can I stay really connected to everyone. Doesn't mean I have to have full-on conversations and, or even engage, but have that space of neutrality and compassion and awareness of the bigger picture, and not feel that person is wrong or judge, because we do judge. I'm not going to pretend that we don't. We all judge. We all, have good sides and bad sides. And so I'm trying really hard to stare those in the face and notice when I'm operating in those zones, because it's really tough to do, but I've seen so much division, and it's really highlighted the way we abuse each other, for our different opinions, and what we fire out into the world because somebody has a different opinion or is acting in a certain way. And I fully take responsibility for the fact that I have done that and will continue to do that, while I'm on earth as a human being and not floating off in the ethers and fully enlightened, because I don't think you get there as a human being. So that's one thing that this has really taught me, is to notice how I've created this world as well, because I've created this just as much as those dark forces that we're talking about, the psychopaths, yes, to the nth degree with their agenda, but I've contributed with my own division and disconnection from myself, within myself, and to other people.
Oh, well, I could speak for so long on this. It's just such a juicy subject, you know what I mean? And it's just great now that we're all working out our own culpability in this. That I think that's the biggest thing, because we just want to be like you say, it's them. It's like it's us as well. Have you got anything that you want to finish this conversation with, but also, are you bringing any trainings or any programs or anything like that you want to speak about, that anyone can reach out to you?
So God, like you say, it's such a big subject. I don't even know if I could pick one thing that I would want maybe just to stand out. I guess really it's just, be really gentle with yourself. Be really kind to yourself, because it's really tough times that we're going through. Secondly, from a much firmer place, don't get distracted by fear. Anything that takes you away from that place within is a distraction. It's a distraction that will lead you off your path. So whenever you're off your path, with love, with compassion, whatever, come back to, shit, I got distracted by that thing over there. Just really connect with people in your tribe to stay sane. People that uplift you, people that support you, people that will let you be you and will support you to be you, whatever space you're in, whatever you bring to the table. And with regards to trainings, I do, I'll be running some trainings later on this year, which will actually be residential retreats. It'll be under a different umbrella, which is called Mind Magic Medicine, as opposed to my Innate Healing, which is going to be a lot more of it's a three residential retreats with stuff in between, support and trainings. And it's really for people who want to dive deep into finding out who they are and transforming who they are, to come back to their true self, their true nature, but also to have the tools to deal with, how do I deal with these parts of me? How do I deal with what's coming up? How do I deal with this human experience and transform it, be with it, embrace it? So that'll be some really deep training that'll have its roots in scientific stuff from neuroscience. I'm doing it with a colleague who's a real kind of specialist in the mind, and we'll be diving deep into shamanic stuff. So I'll be going completely into non-ordinary reality, the non-physical, to really tap into that power to alchemize and create. So I'm really excited about running those. Actually, I think they're going to be really cool.
Beautiful work. Oh, sounds so good. I just love deep dives. I love exploration, especially exploration of self, and busting, my own kind of blocks and paradigms and everything like that, and just seeing what that does. So to do that is special work and exciting for anyone to take up. Can you just let everybody know where best to find you, like social media and websites?
Okay, so I'm on Instagram at Innate Healing, and my website is www.innatehealing.co.uk, and you can also find me on mindmagicmedicine.com. But Instagram's probably the easiest place, or just find me through my website. You can email me there.
Thank you, Serap, for our conversation today, and thank you for listening and bearing with me with the audio issues that I had. You can find out more about me on my website, carolmaywhittick.com, CarolMaywhittick. I'm Carol May Whittick on Facebook, on Instagram, Casmic, and Her Conversations on Telegram. It's a burgeoning channel, so we're still clawing together the numbers. Once we build a community there, I've got some really exciting things that I want to start over on that channel. So until the next episode, look after yourself in these crazy times, stay strong, stay centered. Speak soon. Bye.